The morning light filtered through the blinds, painting my living room in a muted glow that felt entirely out of place. I stood frozen in the doorway, holding my phone like a grenade that had just gone off in my hands. The news was shocking, yet it felt like a betrayal I had been preparing for, even if I had been too naive to see it coming. My wife, Jessica, had cheated on me. And not just with anyone. She had been seeing a Hollywood producer, a man whose name was synonymous with power and glamour in the industry. The email from my friend, a tabloid journalist, had laid it all bare, a sordid affair that had been going on for months. My heart raced, pounding against my ribs like a caged animal desperate to escape. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger, humiliation, and a profound sense of loss. Jessica had always been the light in my life, the one who understood my quirks and embraced my dreams. I had trusted her completely. How could she betray me so callously? The irony of it all gnawed at me. Wasn't I the one who had supported her dreams when she wanted to pursue acting? I had cheered her on in auditions and rehearsals, convinced that she would make it big one day. Yet here I was, left in the shadows of her betrayal. I could see her in my mind's eye, laughing and smiling with this producer, a man who had the world at his feet. The image was seared into my memory, and I felt sick. How could she throw away everything we had built together for a fleeting moment of passion? I had always known that the entertainment industry was rife with temptation, but I had never thought it would touch our lives so intimately. The thought of her in his arms, sharing whispered secrets and stolen kisses, made my stomach churn. I sank onto the couch, the weight of the revelation pressing down on me. I thought of the life we had shared, the late-night conversations, the laughter, the dreams we had painted together. All of it felt like a cruel joke now. I couldn't help but replay the moments leading up to this betrayal. Had there been signs? The late nights she spent working, the sudden interest in her appearance, the way she had become distant. I had brushed it off as stress, but now it felt like a warning I had ignored. My phone buzzed again, pulling me from my spiraling thoughts. It was my friend, Greg, checking in. He had been the one to send me the email, the one who had risked his own career to deliver the news. I typed a quick response, my fingers trembling as I struggled to find the right words. "Thanks for telling me," I wrote, the weight of the situation settling in my chest. As I sat there, I felt a fire ignite within me, slowly replacing the numbness. I couldn't just sit back and let this slide. Jessica had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. I thought of the producer, the smug look on his face, the way he would have celebrated his conquest. I wanted to make him pay. I wanted to expose him, to tear down the facade he had built around his career. The thought of ruining his life felt like a balm to my wounded pride. I rose from the couch, my resolve hardening. I had never been one for revenge, but this was different. I was tired of feeling powerless. I would not let Jessica's betrayal go unanswered. I would expose this man for who he really was, and in doing so, I would reclaim my dignity. The tabloids would eat this story alive, and I would make sure they got every dirty secret. As I paced the room, my mind raced with possibilities. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins, fueling a determination I had never known before. This was not just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my narrative, taking back control over my story. The thought of Jessica's face when she found out what I was planning filled me with a dark satisfaction. I would show her that I was not the weak man she thought I was. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. The path I was about to embark on was fraught with moral dilemmas, but at that moment I didn't care. I just needed to act. As I sat in the dim light of my living room, the reality of my relationship with Jessica began to unfold like a tragic play. It had been years since we first met, years filled with laughter, dreams, and a love I thought was unbreakable. We had been inseparable since our college days, where we spent countless nights discussing our hopes for the future, sharing ambitions, and supporting each other through thick and thin. Back then, we were just two kids with big dreams, navigating the uncertain world of adulthood together. Jessica had always been the star in our little universe. Her beauty and charisma drew people in, and I was no exception. I was captivated by her passion for acting, her ability to light up a room with her smile. I admired her talent and believed in her dreams, often pushing her to audition for roles and encouraging her to take risks. I remember the early days when she would come home beaming after landing a small part in a local theater production. We celebrate with takeout and late-night talks about her future on the big screen. But as the years passed and Jessica's career began to take off, things started to shift. I noticed the late nights spent rehearsing lines or attending industry events where I wasn't invited. I tried to be understanding, reminding myself that her success was our success. Yet, with each passing day, the distance between us grew. The late-night rehearsals turned into parties, and the once vibrant connection we shared started to dim. I remember a particular evening when she had come home late from a networking event. I was waiting for her, hoping to hear about the people she had met and the opportunities on the horizon. Instead, she walked in with a distant look in her eyes, as if she was already somewhere else. I brushed it off, thinking it was just stress from the industry. After all, I had always been her rock, the one who would support her no matter what. But now, looking back, I realized there had been signs. The way she had become preoccupied with her appearance, the sudden need for privacy, the secretive phone calls that would send her rushing out of the room. I had been so blinded by love and trust that I couldn't see the cracks forming in our foundation. Perhaps I had chosen to ignore them, hoping that everything would return to the way it once was. As I reflected on our relationship, the moments of joy and the shadows of doubt intermingled in my mind. We had built a life together, filled with shared dreams and aspirations. But the allure of fame had pulled her away, and I had been left in the dust, an afterthought in the narrative of her success. The thought of her with someone else, especially a powerful figure like the producer, felt like a betrayal of everything we had built together. I had always imagined our future children, a cozy home, a love that would withstand the test of time. But now, the image of that future felt tainted. The realization that she had chosen someone else over me, someone who could offer her the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, was a knife to my heart. I had given her everything, and in return she had shattered my trust. Yet, amidst the pain, a simmering anger began to rise within me. I thought of the producer, a man who had likely used his power to manipulate her, to seduce her with promises of fame and fortune. I remembered reading about him in the tabloids, his charming smile, his reputation as a womanizer. It made my blood boil. How dare he take advantage of her vulnerability? How dare he think he could waltz into our lives and claim what was mine? My thoughts spiraled as I considered the implications of my next steps. I had spent years building a life with Jessica, and now I was faced with the prospect of dismantling the very thing I had cherished. Revenge was a dangerous game, and I knew that once I started down this path, there would be no turning back. But I was tired of feeling powerless. I wanted to take control, to expose the truth. I began to formulate a plan, thinking of how I could gather evidence of their affair. I had to be meticulous, ensuring that I didn't act out of blind rage but with calculated precision. I would need to connect the dots, to uncover the dirt that lay hidden beneath the surface of their glamorous lives. The tabloids would be my weapon, and I would make sure they had everything they needed to bring this producer down. The thought of Jessica's face as she realized what I was doing brought a twisted satisfaction. She had made her choice, and now I would make mine. I would show her that I was not just a bystander in my own life. I would reclaim my narrative and expose the truth, no matter the cost. As I sat there, the weight of my decision settled over me like a heavy shroud. I had loved her fiercely, but now it was time to embrace the darkness that had been awakened within me. I was ready to fight for my dignity, to wrestle back control of my life. The game had changed, and I was determined to play it to win. The days following my discovery felt like a waking nightmare, each hour stretching into eternity. I had made the decision to gather evidence about Jessica's affair, but the reality of executing that plan was daunting. I had never been one to pry or snoop, but desperation had a way of pushing boundaries. I needed to know the extent of her betrayal, and I needed proof that would resonate with the tabloids. I started with the basics: social media. Jessica had always been active online, sharing snippets of her life, her career milestones, and her interactions with industry peers. I combed through her posts, looking for anything that could hint at her relationship with the producer. The more I dug, the more I felt like an intruder in her life, but I had to do it. I had to know. As I scrolled through her Instagram, I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak. There were pictures of her at glamorous parties, laughing with friends and colleagues, but the ones that struck me the most were the ones she had taken with him. A photograph from a recent premiere showed her standing next to the producer, their arms draped over each other's shoulders, eyes sparkling with a shared secret. I felt bile rise in my throat as I stared at their smiles, the way they had looked so comfortable together. I needed more than just social media snapshots. I needed to be strategic. I decided to reach out to some of Jessica's friends, people I had got to know over the years. I had always been friendly with them, and if anyone knew the truth, it would be them. I crafted an innocuous message, pretending to be concerned about Jessica's well-being. "Hey, I haven't seen Jess in a while. Is she okay? I hope everything's good with her career." It was a gamble, but I was willing to take the risk. I received a few responses that were vague and polite, but one friend, Sarah, responded in a way that made my heart race. "She's been busy with work, but I think she's doing great. Just be there for her." It was a standard reply, but the tone felt off, almost as if she was trying to deflect my curiosity. I pressed further. "Is she seeing anyone? I just want to make sure she's happy." Sarah took a while to reply, and when she finally did, it was a single word: "No." My heart sank. Was she lying to protect Jessica? I had to find a way to get more information. The next step was to do a little digging on the producer himself. I had heard his name before, but now I needed to understand who he was and how he operated. I spent hours researching him online, reading articles, watching interviews, and trying to piece together a timeline of his recent activities. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became. He was a man who thrived on power, using his influence to manipulate those around him. One article I stumbled upon detailed his history of affairs with actresses he had worked with. It was a pattern, a cycle of seduction and abandonment that left a trail of broken hearts in its wake. I could almost hear the echoes of his charm, the way he would have wooed Jessica with promises of stardom and success. I felt an overwhelming urge to confront him, to expose him for the predator he was, but I knew I had to be smarter than that. I needed to gather more concrete evidence. A few days later, I was at a local cafe, nursing a coffee and staring blankly at my laptop screen. I was lost in thought when I saw Jessica walk by with a group of friends, the producer among them. My heart raced as I watched them from a distance, a mix of anger and hurt bubbling inside me. I could see the way she laughed at something he said, her eyes sparkling with a life that felt so foreign to me now. It was infuriating, watching her so carefree while I was drowning in the weight of betrayal. I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening again. If I was going to expose him, I needed to get closer, to gather proof that would leave no room for doubt. I decided to follow them, a decision that felt both reckless and necessary. I needed to see what was happening between them firsthand. I trailed them through the streets, my heart pounding in my chest. They stopped at an upscale restaurant, a place I had taken Jessica to for special occasions. I watched from across the street as they entered, the door swinging shut behind them. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, but I steeled myself. This was my chance to catch them in the act. After what felt like an eternity, I found a spot where I could peek into the restaurant through the large windows. I saw them sitting at a table, leaning in close, their body language betraying an intimacy I had never imagined she would share with someone else. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking as I began to record. The moment felt surreal, like I was watching a scene from a movie, but it was all too real and too painful. I captured snippets of their conversation, the way he leaned in to whisper something that made her laugh. I felt a mix of anger and desperation, knowing that I was witnessing the end of what I had once thought was a solid marriage. Once I had enough footage, I slipped away, my heart racing. I had what I needed now, evidence that would expose the truth. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, the thrill of knowing I was one step closer to taking down the man who had invaded my life. But as I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. Was I really prepared to destroy someone's career? The answer was simple, yes. I had to do it for myself, to reclaim my dignity and show Jessica that I wouldn't be a victim of her choices. The path was set, and I was ready to execute my plan. With the evidence securely tucked away on my phone, I felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with dread. I had crossed a line, stepping into a world of deception and revenge that I had never imagined I would inhabit. My thoughts raced as I contemplated my next moves. How would I expose the producer? How could I ensure that the tabloids would take my story seriously? I knew I needed to act quickly. The longer I waited, the more time Jessica and the producer had to cover their tracks. I began to draft a plan, jotting down thoughts and potential strategies on a notepad that felt like a lifeline. My heart pounded as I outlined the steps I needed to take, each one a calculated risk. First, I decided to reach out to Greg, my friend in the tabloids. He had always been a reliable source of information, and I knew he would appreciate the juicy story I had to offer. I sent him a message, careful to keep it vague while still piquing his interest. "Hey, I've got some information that might be worth your time. Let's meet." The response was quick. "Sure, how about tomorrow at our usual spot?" I felt a knot of anxiety twist in my stomach. This was it. I was about to share my truth, to expose the man who had invaded my life. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my mind racing with what I would say. As I waited for Greg, I rehearsed my story in my head, trying to control the flood of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. When he finally arrived, he greeted me with his usual enthusiasm, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. "All right, what's going on?" he asked, settling into his chair. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my decision settle heavily on my shoulders. "It's about Jessica," I began, and the name hung in the air like a dark cloud. "She's been seeing a Hollywood producer. I have proof." Greg's expression shifted from casual interest to serious concern. "What kind of proof?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the video I had captured. As he watched, I could see the gears turning in his mind. When it was over, he looked up at me, a mix of shock and intrigue on his face. "This is gold," he said slowly. "But you know this isn't just a story for the tabloids. This could ruin his career and possibly yours." I nodded, fully aware of the risks. "I know, but he's playing with people's lives. He used his power to seduce my wife. I can't just sit back and let that happen without consequences." Greg leaned back in his chair, considering my words. "What do you want to happen? Are you looking for revenge, or do you want to save your marriage?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been so consumed with anger that I hadn't taken a moment to consider the outcome of my actions. Did I really want to destroy Jessica's life? Or was I just trying to make her understand the pain she had caused? "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just want him to pay for what he did." Greg nodded, his expression softening. "I get it, I really do, but you need to think about the fallout. If this goes public, it will affect both of you. Are you prepared for that?" I felt a wave of uncertainty wash over me. The thought of Jessica's life being destroyed weighed heavily on my conscience, but the image of her with the producer ignited a fire in me that I couldn't ignore. "I have to do this," I finally said, my voice firm. "I need to take control of my life again." Greg agreed to help me craft a statement that would grab the attention of the tabloids. We spent the next hour discussing angles, potential headlines, and the best way to ensure this story would make headlines. The thrill of planning my revenge filled me with a sense of power I hadn't felt in a long time. As we wrapped up, Greg leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing. "Just remember, once you unleash this, there's no going back. You need to be ready for the storm that's coming." I nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. I was ready to face the storm, no matter the cost. Over the next few days, I worked with Greg to finalize the details of the exposé. I gathered all the evidence I had, meticulously organizing it into a dossier that would leave no room for doubt. I felt like a detective piecing together a case, and the adrenaline was intoxicating. The night before we planned to go public, I sat alone in my living room, the weight of my decision heavy on my chest. I thought about Jessica, the life we had built together, and the love that had once seemed unbreakable. but with each memory, the image of her with. The producer pushed through, reminding me of the betrayal that had shattered everything. As I prepared to unleash the truth, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't just fighting for revenge, I was fighting for my own dignity. I had spent too long in the shadows, and it was time to step into the light, no matter how painful it might be. The next morning, I met Greg at the cafe, my heart racing with anticipation and fear. We finalized the details one last time, and as we prepared to send the story to the tabloids, I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. This was it. I was about to set off a chain reaction that would change everything. "Are you ready?" Greg asked, his voice steady. I took a deep breath, nodding slowly. "Let's do it." With a click of a button, I sent the email, and in that moment I knew there was no turning back. I had chosen my path, and I was ready to face the consequences. The fallout from my decision came swiftly and with the force of a tidal wave. It was as if I had lit a fire. And now the flames were consuming everything in their path. The tabloids were relentless, and within hours, the story had exploded across the front pages. Hollywood producer's secret affair with rising star exposed, screamed the headlines, splashed across every major publication. My heart raced as I watched the news unfold, a mix of satisfaction and dread coursing through me. I had expected some chaos, but the scale of the public reaction was overwhelming. Social media erupted, the hashtags trending within minutes. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from friends, acquaintances, and even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know the details, to share their opinions, and to gossip about the scandal that had rocked the entertainment industry. I found myself glued to the television, watching as talking heads debated the implications of the affair. They speculated about Jessica's future, the producer's career, and the moral ramifications of my actions. My heart sank as I saw Jessica's face flash across the screen, the confusion and hurt evident in her eyes. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by the satisfaction of seeing the producer's reputation crumble. The producer had been a figure of power and influence, but now he was being torn apart by the very media that had once celebrated him. I watched as clips of his previous interviews were replayed, the smug smile he wore now twisted into a grimace of shame. It was a beautiful sight, a poetic justice for the pain he had caused. But with each passing hour, as the story gained traction, I began to feel the weight of my actions. I had sought revenge, but in doing so, I had also unleashed chaos into my own life. I started receiving calls from reporters, each one wanting to know my side of the story. I had become a reluctant celebrity, thrust into the spotlight for reasons I never wanted. Then came the moment I had both anticipated and dreaded. Jessica called. I stared at the screen, her name lighting up my phone, and for a brief moment I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her stew in the mess I had created. But another part of me felt a strange sense of responsibility. I had exposed her after all, and she deserved to hear it from me. "Hello," I answered, my voice steadier than I felt. "Where the hell are you?" she demanded, her voice a mixture of anger and hurt. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I do," I replied, my heart pounding. "I did it for a reason, Jess. You made a choice, and now you have to deal with the consequences." Her silence was deafening. "You think this is going to fix anything? You think this is going to make me regret what I did?" I didn't have an answer. I had hoped that exposing the producer would force her to confront her actions, but now I wasn't so sure. "I just wanted you to understand how much you hurt me," I said, my voice cracking. "I can't believe you would do this," she said, her tone shifting to something softer, more vulnerable. "You've ruined everything. I don't even know how to face anyone after this." I felt a pang of regret. "I didn't want to ruin your life, but you left me no choice. You didn't think about the damage you were doing when you were with him." I was confused. She shot back. "I thought I was doing what I needed to make it in this industry. I never meant to hurt you." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had spent so much time focused on my pain that I had forgotten to consider hers. "But you chose him over me. You chose to betray me." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "And I'm so sorry, but this isn't the way to handle it. You've taken it too far." I felt the anger and hurt begin to ebb, replaced by a deep sense of sadness. What do you want me to say? I felt powerless, Jess. I had to do something. Do you even care about what happens to me? She asked, her voice trembling. I paused, realizing that I hadn't taken the time to think about the consequences for her. I had been so focused on revenge that I had lost sight of the love we once shared. I care, I said finally, but I can't just forget what you did. I can't pretend it didn't happen. I don't know what to do now, she whispered. Neither do I. I admitted, the weight of the situation settling heavily on my chest. The call ended, leaving me in a haze of confusion and regret. I had achieved my goal, but at what cost? I had wanted to reclaim my dignity, but instead I had lost sight of the person I once loved. As the days passed, the fallout continued. The producer's career was in freefall, and Jessica found herself at the center of a media storm. I watched as she struggled to navigate the chaos, and my heart ached for the person I had once known. I had wanted revenge, but I hadn't anticipated the way it would change everything. I had become a villain in my own story, and I was left grappling with the consequences of my actions. I had to confront the reality that I had not only hurt the man who had wronged me, but also the woman I had loved for so long. The lines I had drawn in the sand began to blur, and I was left questioning everything. Was revenge worth the cost of love? Had I truly won, or had I only succeeded in losing myself in the process? As the dust began to settle from the chaos I had unleashed, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The initial thrill of revenge had faded, replaced by a heavy emptiness that lingered in the pit of my stomach. I had thought that exposing the producer would bring me a sense of closure, a feeling of victory. Instead, I was left with a hollow ache and an overwhelming sense of regret. Jessica's life had spiraled out of control after the scandal broke. Once a rising star with a promising future, she was now the subject of public ridicule and scorn. Every headline seemed to taunt her, every social media post a reminder of her mistakes. I watched from the sidelines, my heart heavy with guilt. I had wanted to make her understand the pain she had caused me, but in doing so, I had only exacerbated her suffering. I found myself reflecting on our relationship, the love we had once shared, and the dreams we had built together. The memories felt bittersweet now, tainted by betrayal and anger. I had never wanted to hurt her, but my desire for revenge had clouded my judgment. I had crossed a line, and I was no longer sure I could come back from it. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I received a message from Jessica. It was short and to the point. "Can we talk?" My heart raced as I read the words, a mix of anxiety and anticipation coursing through me. I had been dreading this moment, but I also knew it was necessary. I couldn't avoid the conversation forever. We agreed to meet at a small park we used to visit, a place filled with memories of happier times. As I walked there, I felt a sense of foreboding. What would she say? Would she blame me for everything that had happened? Would she apologize again, or would she lash out in anger? The uncertainty gnawed at me. When I arrived, I saw her sitting on a bench, her head down, lost in thought. She looked different, more fragile, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her shoulders. My heart ached at the sight. I had wanted to see her brought down a peg, but I hadn't wanted this. "Hey," I said softly as I approached. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and something that resembled defeat. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We sat in silence for a moment, the tension between us palpable. I felt the need to speak, to explain myself, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, Jessica broke the silence. "I've had time to think about everything," she began, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. I was lost, and I made a terrible mistake. But I also realize now that what you did, it was just as destructive." I nodded, the weight of her words hitting me hard. "I know, I thought I was taking control, but I just made everything worse. I didn't consider how my actions would affect you." She looked away, tears brimming in her eyes. I wanted to believe that we could work through this, but now, her voice trailed off, and I could see the pain etched on her face. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice cracking. "I didn't want to ruin your life. I wanted you to understand the hurt I felt, but I didn't think about what it would mean for you." "I thought I could have it all," she replied, her voice filled with regret. "I wanted to make it in this industry so badly that I lost sight of what really mattered. I lost sight of us." The admission hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth. I had loved her fiercely, but I had also let my anger consume me. We were both to blame for the unraveling of our relationship. "I can't change what happened," she continued, "but I want to try to rebuild. I want to find a way to move forward, even if it's not together." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had spent so much time focused on revenge that I had forgotten the love we once shared. "I want that too," I said, my voice filled with sincerity. "I don't want to hold on to this anger anymore. I want to find a way to heal." We sat in silence, the weight of our shared pain slowly beginning to lift. It was clear that the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time since everything had unfolded, I felt a glimmer of hope. "I don't know what the future holds for us," she said softly, "but I'm willing to try." "Me too," I replied, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "We can take it one step at a time." As we talked, the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park. The shadows of our past still lingered, but the light of possibility began to break through. We both knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I felt a renewed sense of determination. In that moment, I realized that revenge had not brought me the closure I had sought. Instead, it had forced me to confront the deeper issues in our relationship. It had been a painful lesson, but it was one that had opened my eyes to the importance of communication, empathy, and forgiveness. As we parted ways that evening, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The path to healing wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to walk it alongside Jessica. We had both made mistakes, but we also had the chance to learn and grow from them. In the end, I had discovered that love was not just about the highs. It was about weathering the storms together, finding strength in vulnerability, and learning to forgive, both each other and ourselves. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about the future. And as I walked away from the park, I understood that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most profound transformations.